Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your channel, Virgo. The account you stopped checking is about to look different. Something is shifting in the material layer of your life, Virgo. Not in the dramatic announcement making way that the word shifting tends to imply, in the other way, the quiet way, the way that tectonic things move beneath the surface, beneath the visible, beneath everything you have been managing and monitoring and holding together with the particular exhausting precision that Virgo energy brings to the project of simply existing in a world that has, for a long time, been asking more of you than it has been returning. Stay with this. Let it settle before you decide what to do with it. Um, there is a specific kind of poverty that has nothing to do with money. It is the poverty of a person who has been extraordinarily capable in circumstances that consistently, almost deliberately undercompensated that capability, who has brought precision, intelligence, devotion, and a standard of work that most environments were not actually built to reward adequately, and who has absorbed over time the gap between what was offered and what was deserved as information about their own worth rather than as information about the limitations of the contexts they were operating in. That gap has a weight to it, a specific, accumulated, deeply personal weight that sits differently in the body than ordinary financial stress sits. It feels less like a temporary condition and more like a verdict. Less like something that will change and more like something that simply, permanently is Virgo. That weight is not a verdict. It never was. Let me tell you something about the relationship between Virgo energy and abundance because it is one of the most complicated relationships in the entire landscape of human experience with money, and it deserves to be named with some precision. Virgo is, by its essential nature, one of the most capable energies that exists. The precision, the intelligence, the capacity for work that is not merely good, but genuinely excellent, done with a standard of care and attention that most people simply do not bring to what they do, that most environments simply do not know how to adequately compensate. Because the gap between ordinary competence and Virgo level precision is not always visible to the people in the position of assigning value to it. And so, Virgo, more often than is fair or accurate, ends up in the specific and quietly devastating position of being the most capable person in a context that is paying them as though they were average, of bringing extraordinary to environments that have calibrated their compensation structures around ordinary, of watching with the precise and pattern recognizing Virgo eye as people who bring considerably less receive considerably more, and absorbing that disparity not as evidence of a broken system, but as evidence of some personal insufficiency that hasn't yet been identified and corrected, as though the problem were the offering rather than the context receiving it. This reflection invites you to consider what is the most honest accounting you can make of the gap between what you bring and what you have been receiving? And at what point did you begin to accept that gap as normal rather than as something that the next chapter of your life is specifically materially designed to close? Because the next chapter is designed to close it. not as a promise. Promises are not what this is. As a possibility that has been assembling itself from the raw material of everything you have already built, everything you have already learned, everything you have already survived and integrated in the long and largely unwitnessed seasons of a life lived at a level of capability that the visible results have not yet adequately reflected. That possibility is not theoretical, it is not wishful. It is the entirely logical conclusion of a trajectory that has been building beneath the surface toward a point of material breakthrough that the surface has simply not yet caught up to showing. Picture a dam, built not to contain water, permanently built to hold it long enough for the pressure to build, for the accumulation to reach the necessary height, for the weight of everything gathered behind it to become sufficient to produce, when the release finally comes, something considerably more powerful than a trickle. The dam looks from the downstream side like an obstacle, like the reason the water isn't arriving, like the thing standing between the dry ground and the flow it has been waiting for. But the dam is not the obstacle. The dam is the mechanism, and the pressure building behind it quietly, invisibly, with the patient certainty of water that has nowhere else to go, is not frustration. It is preparation. It is the accumulation that makes the arrival, when it comes, actually sufficient. Um, you have been the dry ground, Virgo, for long enough, and the dam has been holding something that has your name written into its destination. This reflection invites you to consider, where specifically have you been positioning yourself as the problem in a financial equation that has actually been a timing equation? And what would it change in the most practical and immediate sense if you separated those two things completely? Because Virgo has a specific and well documented tendency to locate the source of every problem in itself, to turn the analytical precision inward in the moments when external circumstances are not producing the desired results, and conduct a thorough and merciless examination of personal inadequacy. What am I doing wrong? What am I missing? What would a smarter, more capable, more strategically intelligent version of me be doing differently that would produce the results I'm not currently seeing? And that examination, however intelligent, however sincerely motivated, is in this particular situation looking in the wrong direction. The problem has not been you. The precision has not been insufficient. The capability has not been lacking. The timing has simply not yet arrived at the point where the accumulation behind the dam is ready to release. And timing, unlike capability, is not something that responds to self improvement. Let me talk about money directly, because this reading carries it, and evasion would be a disservice. A lot of money on the way to you. Those words, held honestly not as prediction, not as guarantee, but as the specific and serious possibility that they represent, deserve to be examined without the reflexive skepticism that Virgo tends to apply to anything that sounds too good to be cautiously hopeful about. Because the skepticism, however intelligent its origins, is one of the primary mechanisms by which Virgo energy inadvertently delays its own abundance. The refusal to believe in the possibility before it has produced sufficient evidence, the insistence on proof before openness, the disciplined management of expectation that keeps disappointment survivable and also, in the process, keeps the energy of genuine receptivity, the specific, open, unhesitating quality of a person who actually believes something is coming and has organized themselves accordingly, just slightly out of reach. This reflection invites you to consider, what would it require of you internally and practically to begin operating as though the abundance were already in motion, not as a delusional act of magical thinking, but as the entirely reasonable response of a person who has done the work, built the capability, and arrived at the point in a trajectory where the material reward is the next logical thing? Because there is a difference, a real material, consequential difference between a person who is waiting for abundance and a person who is preparing to receive it. The person who is waiting is stationary, is positioned at the edge of their own life, watching the horizon, hoping the horizon will eventually produce something that closes the distance to them. The person who is preparing to receive is moving, is making the decisions, having the conversations, occupying the rooms, asking the questions, and charging the prices that belong to the version of their life where the abundance has already arrived, not because they are pretending, but because they understand that preparation and arrival are not sequential. They are simultaneous. The arrival begins at the moment the preparation becomes genuine. Some of you watching this have been undercharging, not slightly, significantly, in the specific characteristic Virgo way that combines genuine humility about the value of one's own work with a deep, unexamined discomfort with claiming what that work is actually worth in material terms. The discomfort has many faces. Sometimes it presents as modesty. I don't want to seem arrogant about what I bring. Sometimes it presents as pragmatism. The market won't support what I'm actually worth. Sometimes it presents as the residue of environments that consistently told you through their compensation structures, if not their words, that what you bring is worth ordinary rates. And sometimes, most honestly, most commonly, it presents as the quiet, persistent fear that if you ask for what you're actually worth and the answer is no, the no will confirm something about your value that you have been, at some level, afraid to have confirmed. That fear is not the truth of your worth. It is the accumulated residue of contexts that were not built to recognize what you carry. And those contexts, however formative, however long you occupied them, however thoroughly their implicit verdicts about your value have become part of the internal narrative you carry about what you can reasonably expect to receive, do not get to be the final word. They were not qualified to deliver a final word. They were simply the environments available at the time, and the time has changed. This reflection invites you to consider, what is the full, undefended, completely honest number, the price, the salary, the rate, the financial expectation that the version of you who accurately understands their own value would be demanding right now, and what is the distance between that number and what you are currently accepting. Let me tell you what rich actually means for Virgo, because it is not what it means for every other energy, not the flashy, visible, externally oriented version of wealth that some people pursue. Virgo's version of rich is quieter than that, and in its own way, considerably more satisfying. It is the specific experience of financial sufficiency that removes permanently the low grade anxiety that has been the background texture of your relationship with money for longer than you can clearly remember. The experience of looking at a number and feeling for the first time in a long time that the number is adequate, not just barely adequate, not just survivable, but genuinely, comfortably, sustainably sufficient. The experience of making a decision about where to live, what to buy, what opportunity to pursue without the familiar, exhausting financial calculation running simultaneously in the background, quietly limiting every choice before it has had the chance to be made freely. That freedom, that specific, unglamorous, deeply personal freedom from the tyranny of insufficient numbers that is Virgo's version of rich. And it is entirely, legitimately, completely available to you. Some of you watching this are one decision away from something shifting. Not one lucky break, one decision. The decision to occupy your own value without apology. The decision to ask for what the work is actually worth. The decision to walk away from contexts that have been compensating you at the rate of your most diminished self perception and toward contexts that are capable of recognizing and rewarding what you actually bring. That decision is not small. It will feel, in the moment of making it, considerably larger than it will look in retrospect, because decisions that shift financial trajectories tend to feel enormous at the threshold and obvious in the rear view. And the only thing standing between you and the making of it is the familiar, patient, entirely understandable Virgo habit of waiting for more certainty before moving. The certainty is not coming before the movement. It never does. The certainty is a product of the movement, something that arrives after the decision as a confirmation of what was already true, rather than before it as a precondition for action. And you, Virgo, with your precision and your intelligence and your extraordinary, well documented capacity for doing what you commit to doing at a level of excellence that genuinely deserves the material reward that is now finally beginning to orient itself in your direction. You do not need more certainty than you already have. You need only the willingness to move. The power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to conjure abundance from willingness alone. Abundance responds to work, and you have done the work. Not the power to force the timing. The timing has its own intelligence, and it has been operating in your favor in ways that the surface has not yet fully revealed. But the power to stop standing between yourself and what has already been earned, to remove, one by one, the internal barriers, the undercharging, the over-delivering, the reflexive discounting of your own value that have been redirecting abundance away from you and toward contexts and people that have done considerably less to deserve it. Virgo, a lot of money on the way to you. You're going to be rich, not eventually already in motion, already accumulating behind the dam, already pressing toward the release point with the patient, unstoppable certainty of water that has found its level and is simply, finally flowing in the direction it was always going to flow. Trust yourself with this. The number that lives in the honest part of your mind, the one you think about and then immediately dismiss as too much, as arrogant, as something that other people can ask for but not you. That number is not arrogance, it is accuracy. And accuracy in the matter of your own worth is long overdue. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What is the one area where you have been most consistently undervaluing what you bring? The place where the gap between your actual worth and what you have been accepting is the widest and the most costly. And what does financial freedom actually feel like in your specific imagination? Not the generic version, not the version that sounds reasonable to admit to, but the honest, private, completely personal version that you think about in the quiet and then put away because it feels like too much to ask for. Drop it below. I read every single word, and nothing shared here goes unwitnessed or unacknowledged. See you in the next one, and listen. The money that is on the way to you is not luck, it is not fortune. It is the material world finally, belatedly catching up to the value that has been present in you all along. It was always going to arrive here. It simply needed you to stop standing in its way.